Hey there, class. We're going to start section 2 today. It's going to be on angles and angle relationships. An angle is formed by two rays that share a common endpoint. It has a vertex, and which is the common endpoint of the two rays. So our vertex is here. And then it has sides, which are the two actual rays of the angle. So that line there and that line there are considered our side. All right, now let's talk about how we actually name those angles. Naming angles, you can name an angle by 3 points, one from each ray and the vertex, and then the vertex must be in the middle. So if I have 3 points here, somewhere on my angle, we have X, Y, and Z. My angle, we have our angle symbol. We can name it by X, Y, and Z. Notice that Y, my vertex, is in the middle. We can also rearrange the order to be Z, Y, X. As long as my Y stays in the middle, it doesn't matter if your X or your Z comes first. We also, if there are no other angles that share the vertex, you can name the angle by the vertex only. So this angle here, we could also call it angle Y. But if we put a line here, and now we actually have two angles. We put a letter Q here. Now we actually will need to name this by angle X, Y, Q, or angle Q, Y, Z. Again, Y is still the vertex for both of those two angles, in addition to our original X, Y, Z, but we can't call one of them just angle Y because it's the vertex for multiple angles. Okay, so let's just remind ourselves how to use protractor. When we have a protractor and our angle, we start off by making sure that our vertex is going to be on the center of my protractor. So I'm going to put that right in the center. Then I want to make sure that my green dotted line in my picture, or whatever it ends up being on your protractor, lines up with your angle, your bottom of your angle. There we go. Okay, so now because my angle opens this direction, I'm going to use my top numbers. You're always going to start, whatever your bottom ray starts at, that starts at 0. So now I'm going to, oops, I want my angle to stay there. I want to look at my, there. We're going to look at, well, stop moving. All right, I want my protractor. We're going to look at, all right, we're going to look at, see how I'm moving in the same direction of my angle, and I'm going to look until my angle lines up, and I see that that's about 76. Now, your protractors don't have that nice computerized part where it actually does the measuring for you, but I used my top numbers, and I went until my top line, and it went to about 76. So let's look here. Okay, I'm going to take my angle, and you can move your protractor to your angle. I'm going to move my angle to it. Okay, so I'm going to start. Now this time, my angle opens from the left side up. So now I'm going to be looking at my bottom numbers. Okay, so I'm looking at my bottom numbers. And this time, I'm not even going to use the protractor to measure that there. I'm going to be measuring from here. And I look, and I'm 20, and then I'm going to count my little lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right around 28 degrees. Now, we're all going to be measuring a little bit different, but our measurements should come very close to each other. Let's see what this next one looks like. So I'm going to take my protractor, my angle, I'm going to line my vertex up in the center, and my bottom line lines up. Okay, it opens from the left side, so I'm going to measure using my top numbers, starting at 0. And if I measure this one, I can see that my line is going to line right up with 120 degrees. I will have protractors available for you in class to use, and we can practice them. And if you're struggling with them after this video, talk to me and we can look at them one-on-one together. Okay, then we also have what's called congruent angles. Congruent angles, remember, are going to be two angles if they have the same measure. And congruent angles are going to be marked, you'll see here with the red line, and the other red line. That's going to imply that they're congruent. Now, when we look at them in our book is going to also have a line like this, similar to the ones we did when our lines were congruent. That's one way, or sometimes you'll see in other textbooks or worksheets that if we're looking at multiple angles, they might have two lines to mark congruency in both of them. So those are two different ways that we can look at marking congruent angles. Congruent angles can be formed by an angle bisector. An angle bisector divides an angle into two congruent angles. So if I label some points here, we have A, D, B, and C. I can say that my large angle, angle ADC, that's referring to this big angle, is bisected by segment, or ray, I should say, DB. Okay, and that has created two congruent angles. And the two congruent angles are going to be angle ABB, and I can use my congruent sign, and then I have angle BDC. Now remember, we could switch the letters, the first and the third letter around at either of those angles. But we have a large angle, it's bisected by a ray, and it creates two congruent angles. So if we look here, we have three examples. So which of the diagrams has an angle bisector? So some ray that divides into two congruent angles. And you'll see that it's our middle one here. The first one, they're not two congruent angles, 43 and 44. And the last one has two congruent angles, but not one ray that has bisected a larger one. So we're going to look here. It's our middle one. And we want to name the angle and its bisector. So we're going to name our large angle SRQ is bisected by RP, and that's a ray. All right, I also want to look at these three diagrams here and name all congruent angles in the figures. So looking at our first diagram, neither of those angles are the same measure, so we have no congruent angles there. In my second diagram, we have the angle bisector, so we have angle SRP is congruent to angle PRQ. Okay, and then in the third diagram, we have two congruent angles. They're marked right there and there. So we have angle YMN is congruent to angle OME. So being able to recognize the congruent angles and then name them. All right, here's your assignment for section 1. Unit 1, Section 2, and this is going to be due on Friday.